Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages, Florida podcast. In this show we talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs and interesting folks who live here in the villages, to give perspectives of what is happening here in the villages. We are a listener-supported podcast. You can become a supporter for as little as $3 per month, or you can choose to pay more. To become a supporter, go to openforuminthevillages.com and click on Support in the black box. There will be shoutouts for supporters in episodes. In Season 4, we have made some dramatic improvements and changes. First is a clarification of the podcast's title. It is Open Forum in the Villages, Florida, to make clear that this is a regional show, independently produced for folks who live in Central Florida and the Villages areas. Second is a dramatic increase in the use of AI in the creation of each episode. These include a transcript of each show. Please understand that there may be errors inserted by the AI that may not be caught before the transcript is published. However, this is a dramatic step forward. We will now include chapter markers for each show. The show description text will be AI generated. In fact, the show's announcers are now all AI voices, including me, Emily. Hope you enjoy.
This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages. I'm here today with Dr. Pam Pierceall. She originally grew up in El Dorado, Kansas, graduated from Fort Hays State University in 1977, and received her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine from Kansas State in 1982. Pam has practiced veterinary medicine in Bloomfield, Iowa for 37 years, and as a solo mixed animal practitioner, she owned her own practice in a small rural farming community. Her practice consisted of cattle, small animals that chew their own cud like cows, and horses and companion animals. She also worked for a short time in a private zoo where she worked with several exotic animals like lions, bears, and even a seal. Where was that zoo, Pam?
In Florence, Iowa, in the same county that I was living in.
Okay. What was the largest major city where you were living?
The largest city was Des Moines. Mm-hmm. That was 100 miles.
Okay, so you were really out in the suburbs.
I was very rural. The whole county was 10,000 people. The entire county. So
we can almost get that in two villages here in the village.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're talking rural Iowa, farming community.
Good. So how long have you lived here in the villages?
5 years.
Mm-hmm. And what village did you live in?
Finney.
Finney. Okay.
Yeah.
I looked at Finney before I bought here.
I liked it because it was rural,
more
rural. It had the more country feel. It doesn't anymore, but I still love it.
Yeah, big surprise.
Yes.
They built 10,000 houses next to you.
Yes.
Good. Pam is also serving as a volunteer for the Marion Therapeutic Riding Association, where she's both a veterinarian and on their board.
Yes.
Good. So, Pam, why don't you tell our listeners why you decided to become a vet in the early 80s?
I worked for a veterinarian when I was in high school, and I just really enjoyed the practice. I enjoyed the medicine part, the science, but I had no desire to go into human medicine. So when I went to Fort Hays State, I worked at a feedlot, a 21,000 head feedlot, wrote pens, worked on cattle, and really, really enjoyed that. I worked for a veterinarian in Hays, and then went on to Kansas State to complete my practice.
Okay. And after you completed your practice, why did you choose a rural community?
Well, that's kind of a long and twisty story, but my husband had, at the time, we had just gotten married, and he was a farmer from Illinois, and we found farm ground, and we went there right after we were married, and that's how we landed in Southeast Iowa.
Okay. What did you find as the most enjoyable part of your practice of veterinary medicine?
Having something different to do every day, that it wasn't repetitious. Every day was different. Every day was exciting. I was outside working on cattle. At the time, I did a lot of pigs and sheep, and I worked in a strictly large animal practice. And so that I started building their small animal practice, but it was just exciting.
You say small animal, dogs and cats would be small animals?
Yes, companion animals is
okay.
what we call them.
Okay. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about some of the experiences you had while working at the zoo?
All right. Well, one of the things that actually made national made an AP story was Buford was a lion. He was about 3 years old, about maybe 350, 400 pounds. He started having liver problems. So I'd been taking care of Buford since he was a cub. So he knew me. Mm-hmm. And we were actually had the opportunity to do an MRI on him to see what was wrong with his liver. Mm-hmm. So here we are, and we're doing it in our human hospital. So we're bringing Buford the lion in a cage to the hospital. People are staring, mm-hmm. and we're wheeling him down the halls of our hospital. Mm-hmm. I had to give him some ketamine, and because he was familiar with me, he knew me, and he let me give him his ketamine. And then after he was sedated with his ketamine, then I was able to put an IV in him, and we did a Suretal drip. We put him in the MRI machine. We did not want him waking up inside the MRI machine. So I maintained the anesthesia, and we put him in, and we actually were on national news. I still have the newspaper clipping with a picture of me and Buford the lion in an MRI. Now this was 25 years ago, and the technology has increased, but 25 years ago, it was pretty unusual to do an MRI. And so that was just kind of fun.
What did you have to bring him to do an MRI in rural? Where was the machine that you brought him to?
In our local hospital.
You had one
in Bloomfield. Yeah, Davis County Hospital. And so that was exciting. And then when we found out that it was his liver that was malfunctioning, we adjusted his diet, and he got to feeling a lot better. Mm-hmm. And so his companion, Lioness, was named Kenya, and I went out to see her. And again, I'd been taking care of her since she was a cub. Mm-hmm. And Kenya came up to me. She was about 300 pounds. She came up to me, and she wrapped her front paws around my waist, mm-hmm. and she's looking at me straight in the face. Mm-hmm. I wasn't scared of her because I knew her, she knew me, and she was really giving me a hug. Mm-hmm. However, I looked at her great big canine teeth that were looking me right in the face. Mm-hmm. And without showing any fear, I reached behind my back. I pulled one paw off. I pulled the other paw off, and I gently sat her back down, mm-hmm. all 4 feet on the ground, and slowly backed up out of the cage. I don't think she would have hurt me, but if she would have wanted to, she could have had me.
Very different kind of practice working with wild animals, I imagine.
Yes. And I wasn't particularly trained in this. This was just something I was helping my friends with that had developed this small private zoo. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What were some of your more interesting experiences working with regular animals, domesticated?
Well, one time I had a mare prolapse her uterus, and these
Some of our listeners might not know what that means.
So she had a colt, she was about a 1,500-pound Belgian mare. She had a colt. It was really cold. It was probably 10 degrees outside, snowing. It was an Amish barn, and so there was no lights, no heat. Went in there, and her uterus had turned inside out. Mm. All right, so then my husband had to hold the uterus up, and I literally had to use the top of my head to push the uterus back into her body. Mm. And she had a colt the next year, so
guess you did a good job.
She survived.
That's good. I always like to tell a joke during the show for my grandson, Evan. Find out if you're listening, Evan. Here it is. I had to find a joke that featured animals for you. Why do birds fly south in the winter, Pam?
To enjoy Florida. I don't know.
It's much faster than walking.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what got you involved with the Marion County Therapeutic Riding Association?
Well, after I had retired, it took me a couple of years to just heal my body. I was so tired. And after I love the villages, and I was able to enjoy all that the villages had, but my body was tired. I was burned out.
How did you become aware of the villages?
Oh, we looked and looked. When my husband now, we've been married about 5 years, he saw that I was just about done. Mm-hmm. And he was afraid for my well-being. Mm-hmm. And so we started looking. We looked in Arizona, Flagstaff, all around on the coast of Florida, Branson, Missouri, and a high school friend of mine who I had reconnected with in Facebook. We used to be real dear friends in high school. She was into Varies, and she said, come look at Central Florida. I said, why did you pick Central Florida? We're looking in the coast. She says, just come visit me. So I went to the Central Veterinary Conference in Orlando, and then we came and visited them. And the minute we drove into Central Florida and stayed with them, we knew this was it. Now, my mom, my dad had just recently passed, and they were in Bella Vista, Arkansas. And my mom said, if you go to Florida, I'm going to the Villages. And I'm like, why the Villages, Mom? She says, well, that's where everybody goes. So we brought her here. We did a trolley tour, and Jim and I looked at each other and said, okay, this is it. After spending about 3 years looking and looking, we did one trolley tour and said, this is it. So that was it.
The trolley tour is so ubiquitous for people who move into the Villages that I run the Improvisational Theater Club. We have created a special improv number for the Villages trolley tour. Quite funny.
Oh, is it?
It's going to be in the November 7th improv show at Israel Rec Center.
Oh, okay.
And tickets are going to go on sale about August 7th. You can go to the Improv's website.
Okay.
thevillagesimprov.com, look at the calendar or the lead page, and it'll give you the link to get tickets. The last show that we did in February sold out in about 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. I love improv.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, we always could use another improv player.
Oh, well, no, I would be really bad at it, but I love watching other people do it.
Oh, yeah, we have fun. We have a lot of fun. We have a little trip this weekend. We're going to Sarasota, where they have the Improv Festival. They have 28 improv troupes from around the world coming in to do stuff. They have workshops on Saturday afternoon, so it should be a lot of fun. So tell us a little bit about what you do at the Marion Therapeutic Writing Association, and how does it help people?
Well, I was going to start to say, after I got to feeling better, I knew that God wasn't finished with me, that I still, once I had my health back, I needed to give back. So I started looking for some place that I could use my talents. Did not want to go back into practice, but when I read this article about them, I decided that maybe this would be some place that I could use my veterinary skills. And so I went and got acquainted with them and fell in love with them. And so I do help with the herd health, but what I really found was that I fell in love with the kids. And I spent my career taking care of the horses. They were okay. I've offered my veterinary skills, but where I really enjoy is the kids. I work with the Sozo kids and the Arnett House, which are foster kids getting ready to age out of the system. And I also, the girls that have really caught my heart are the Hands of Mercy girls. And these are the teenagers that they've been exploited, and they might have children. They might have been kicked out of their home. And I just spent some time with them yesterday, and they are lovely girls that have just been mistreated. And we teach them how to ride. We do groundwork with them, teach them how to groom the horses, and then I feed them a meal. And so we sit down at a table and we eat together. And they have really, really stolen my heart. And so I saw that they had a need for the board member, and I agreed to be a board member. And since we've had some changes and we are improving the facilities, and we've received some substantial donations that have allowed us to put in some better facilities and programs, and I see us growing.
Where is the Marion County Therapeutic Writing Association located?
It's in Ocala, north of Bellevue.
This is Mike Roth with Dr. Craig Curtis with today's Alzheimer's tip. Dr. Curtis, in past tips, you've told our listeners to walk is a good exercise 5 days a week. Is there any other exercise that they can do which will be beneficial to their brains, which is not going to be terribly exerting or can be accomplished by people who have weak hip joints or weak knee joints or shoulder joints?
Absolutely. Any type of exercise, what we call moderate exercise, can help brain health, such as a stationary bicycle. Simply pedaling a stationary bicycle, it's very low stress on the joints. It's very good for your heart and very good for your brain.
With over 20 years of experience studying brain health, Dr. Curtis's goal is to educate the Villages community on how to live a longer, healthier life. To learn more, Visit his website, craigcurtismd.com, or call 352-500-5252 to attend a free seminar.
Okay. Yeah, I've noticed that the whole area here in Ocala, Central Florida, is horse country.
It is much. Yes, there is a lot of horse facilities in Ocala. It is the horse capital of the world, or that's what they call themselves.
Their equestrian center is quite spectacular.
It's amazing. Jason Reynolds, who is the executive director of the Florida Horse Park, is also on our board.
Mm-hmm. I've never been to the Florida Horse Park. What is that all about?
It's just another place for them to have horse shows. Mm-hmm. And it's a very nice facility. Unfortunately, the World Equestrian Center kind of overshadows it, but it has its place in having horse shows.
Yeah. Grand Oaks is nice too.
Yes, it is. Very nice.
Seen a couple of shows there.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can give our listeners a couple of tips who have pets, look for a veterinarian.
So in the time frame from when I started practicing to what we look for now, in a small community, we look mostly for like personality. You are with your veterinarian, you're going to church with them, you're going to ball games with them. And so it's like proximity, and you get to know your veterinarian. But now veterinary medicine has changed. It is more corporate and less personal. And so it's harder to pick a veterinarian because they're multi-doctor practices. You might not see the same vet twice.
Mm-hmm. That's a problem.
And you don't develop a personal relationship with some of the bigger practices, and more practices are becoming corporate. And with the corporate, they have to do more things they have a checklist that they have to do, which increases the price. Because the corporation is wanting to have X amount of dollars with
return on investment.
Yeah. So this impersonalizes the veterinarian. It also increases on the smaller practices. It increases the pressure to get more technology. So you have to have more investment, even if you're a small practice. You have to have the x-ray machines, the ultrasound machines, the blood work machines, because that's what your competition also has, which increases the price of your services. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I am glad I'm not practicing anymore is the effect of social media on veterinary medicine and on doctors, because I am glad that not every person I ever saw, every animal I ever treated, didn't end up on a social media site, so that you are constantly being scrutinized. You have to watch your reputation. And my son is actually in the business of helping wellness professionals maintain their reputation, because one bad review can really destroy you. Not one, but it hurts. It hurts. And personally, I'm glad I don't have to read what some people thought. You would do the best you could, but you can't please everybody, or there's misperceptions, or there's bad outcomes. And the next thing you know, you're all over social media as being such and such. And that would have destroyed me. I couldn't have taken it. I couldn't have read that. And it does cause a lot of harm in a lot of professions, but veterinarians are especially kind of kind-hearted, and we don't like it when people don't like us. And so you see a lot of depression and
depression in veterinarians.
Because they are being constantly scrutinized and analyzed and talked about on social media. I see it all the time, even like on Talk of the Villages or the Facebook pages. Such and such didn't do this for me, or I didn't have a good experience here. And sometimes there's misunderstandings.
Yeah. And
it
probably 20 years ago in the dental practice area, there became a group of vendors who were selling dental practice software and then practice management training. And frankly, I was annoyed by it. And then I discovered that there were veterinarian practice management softwares and vendors who were selling veterinarian practice management to veterinarians using a very extremely sales-oriented approach, and they were using a series of techniques which were akin to creating a franchise.
And this is exactly what happened. I was there. I was going to all of those marketings, and a lot of times you knew that the same people were giving the dental offices and the veterinary offices the same advice to try to increase your sales, not procedures, but the practices were the same. And I sat there and I watched it. 20 years ago, I went to many of those marketing seminars just trying to help my own business. And I started seeing the trend. And then I started seeing you have to have your average price ticket. Let's do this because that will increase your average price ticket. And I didn't see the value in it. I didn't really see it necessary. I'm in a small rural practice. They aren't going to agree to do that. And then I have to go sit in church or sit down at the softball game or the baseball game with them. And I did not want them to think that I had just charged them for a procedure that wasn't really necessary.
Yeah, it was an unnecessary blood test.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had clients come, I'm in Southeast Iowa. I had clients come from Chicago and Colorado Springs. They had family in Bloomfield. And so they would come to me, bring their animals all the way from Chicago or Colorado Springs just to save money because they knew I wouldn't charge them thousands of dollars to pull a tooth, or something like that. I had that quite a bit.
Did you?
Because I started seeing what was going on in our industry.
Yeah. I lived in Cincinnati for many years, and in the first two suburban belts around Cincinnati, there were, I thought, far too many veterinarians per square mile. And I think it hurt some of the practices. I didn't see the impact of social media, but I'll believe it here in the villages with Talk of the Villages.
It's everywhere now. It is.
Oh, yeah.
It is everywhere now, and it is. And also another thing that technology is doing to our practices is now you have to have sophisticated software to send out your reminders, to track, all your vaccination. Now I did that too, but you had to do all of this extra. You had to have all of this extra technology
overhead
in order to be competitive. And all of that is very expensive. All that software, all of the technology is expensive. And so if you're a small practice, like I was a solo practitioner, I couldn't afford that. So
did you have an assistant or a nurse that helped you?
I did. I had staff.
Okay. So with all the computer programs, they had to learn the computer program when the program didn't work right.
Yeah. So I didn't have a real sophisticated system because, like I said, I would just see them at the grocery store and say, "Hey, don't forget," or "How is your dog doing?"
Right.
But if you were in a larger area, you wouldn't have that availability.
Well, there's a difference.
I had more accountability to my clients because they were my friends.
They knew you.
They knew me.
Right.
They knew where to find me. They knew where I was going to be at.
Right.
So
today, the practitioners can hide.
Yes. The joke I tell in our town is you didn't need to turn on your blinker because everybody knew where you were going to turn anyway.
A small town.
Yeah, small town.
Right. Not even having a traffic light.
No, we had one.
You had one traffic light
Yeah.
and probably a stop sign too?
Yep.
Oh, boy.
I also was involved with organized veterinary medicine, and I was on the board of the Iowa Veterinary Medical Association.
Okay.
And one of the concerns I had over the years, and I would say this, I don't know is rural America was not being taken care of. We were having lots and lots of veterinarians, but they were all going to small animal practices in large towns. And it was getting harder and harder to get veterinarians to go into the rural communities. And because it's harder, pulling calves, going out on farm calls is harder. And there was a lot of more women in the veterinary schools they were graduating, mostly women who, a lot of them went into this the companion animal side. And many of the men went into the companion animal side, and it became harder and harder to get the rural practices.
So that would suggest that the scarcity of veterinarians for rural practices would naturally drive up the price of rural services.
It would, and it was much harder to be a rural, because you were all on your own. You couldn't get an associate to come help you.
Why?
It just was hard. It was a hard life.
It's a hard life.
I did all of my own emergencies for 37 years.
So 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, you were on call.
I was, and I worked 7 days a week because I did my own chores. So on Sunday morning before I went to church, I was in taking care of the animals. On Sunday afternoon, I'd be back in there. I worked every Saturday, and it's exhausting. And I was also a single mother. So my poor kids had to. One of the stories I like to tell is when they would hear the phone ring at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would just roll out of bed, put on their little cowboy boots, put on their little Carhartt jackets, and go, "Where are we going now, Mom?" I had to take them everywhere with me for 10 years. So until they were old enough to stay home by themselves.
On the other side of the coin, you could say that you gave them some good training in what being an independent business person really is.
Yes. My oldest son still has not forgiven me for this, but we were golfing one time, and I was on the phone. I was putting one-handed and on the phone. And he goes, "Mom, we are on vacation. You aren't supposed to be working." I'm like, "I have to. I just have to." And he was so mad at me. 20 years later, we're on a boat. I'm retired. I'm sitting there enjoying things, and he is pacing the dock on a phone call for work, and I'm laughing at him, and he goes, "Okay, Mom, I get it now."
Now.
Yeah. But he didn't forgive me for many years that I was taking a phone call while we were golfing.
So when you were on vacation, did you actually leave the area of your practice?
I did, but I had a telephone with me. Neighboring practitioners who would take care of my clients, but only because they had to call them, call another practice because I wasn't there. I did not bring in somebody who could take over my practice while I was gone. So I just had to leave my practice unattended. My first son, I took a month off. My second son, 2 hours after I had Chase, my second son, I'm on the phone talking to a client 2 hours after he was born.
Wow.
I went back to work full time when he was 2 weeks old. One time I had to wrap him up in a little blanket and set him on a bale of hay and pull some lambs. And it was cold. But I put my little baby on the bale of hay and did my work, picked him up, and took him with me.
Well, that's good you didn't forget him.
Yeah, I didn't forget him. So one time I looked at my truck, and there were 2 pillows, a blanket, a TV, and 2 bowls of macaroni and cheese in my Ford Ranger. And I thought, these poor kids. But you know what? I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's good.
They just had to go with me. They grew up okay.
I think they probably grew up with a better sense of what business is.
Oh, yes.
And probably are better people because of it. So, Pam, before we go, if someone wants information about the Therapeutic Riding Association up in Marion, how do they get in touch with the group? Why don't you tell our listeners how they can get in touch with the Marion Therapeutic Riding Association?
Yes. If they would like to look up our website, it is Ocala.org, or they can call our office at 352-732-7300. We're always looking for volunteers, and if anybody would like to help us with some donations or would like to come out and help lead horses or help us in any other way, we are always looking for volunteers.
Okay. Thanks very much for being with us.
All right. Thank you.
Remember, our next episode will be released next Friday at 9 a.m. Should you want to become a major supporter of the show or have questions, please contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. This is a shout out for supporters Greg Pangian, Tweek Coleman, Dan Capellan, Ed Williams, Alvin Stenzel, and major supporter Dr. Craig Curtis at K2 in the Villages. We will be hearing more from Dr. Curtis with short Alzheimer's tips each week. If you know someone who should be on the show, contact us at mike@rothvoice.com. We thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyrighted by Roth Voice 2023, all rights reserved.